We have started seeing Bollywood getting into podcasting. We have seen other influencers getting into this, right? So you have seen creators from Instagram or YouTube jumping into this medium. And the reason for that is simple, right? If you want to get someone's attention, video can be a great medium. But let's be honest. But if you want to retain someone's attention for a longer period of time, then podcast is such a great medium, because you can't retain somebody for half an hour or 45 minutes on a video, but you can do that on audio because listening is secondary activity.
Hello and welcome to the Success with Savita podcast, where we share hot tips on how to do life and business without losing your mind. I'm your host, Savita Nanjappa, entrepreneur, high-achieving 9-to-5er turned transformational success coach, helping you create a wildly successful business. Come hang out with me and other fabulous humans like you every week for stories and chats packed with a healthy dose of tips, resources, how-tos, and real talk. Side effects may include a happier and more confident you with each passing day. Hey everyone, welcome to the Success with Savita podcast. If you've been tuning in regularly, you know we've been bringing some amazing guests onto the podcast. And my guest today is no different. This is an action-packed, value-packed conversation, and there is so much to take away. My guest today is coming on the podcast to talk about podcasts. With that, let me introduce to you my guest for today, Bijay Goutaum. Bijay is the co-founder of WYN Studio, a creative content studio specializing in audio storytelling and podcasts. He also hosts one of the top podcasts in India, The Inspiring Talk, reaching over 1 million people. It's one of my favorite podcasts as well. On this podcast, he chats with top entrepreneurs, best-selling authors, thought leaders, and celebrities about their journey. His podcast has gained wider accolades from his listeners and media and was a finalist for Asia's Best Podcast Award 2019. As India's first podcast coach and consultant, he has coached hundreds of people and has helped several organizations launch their podcasts. Bijay has been featured by national media like the Hindustan Times, the Ken, and the Sunday Guardian Live, among others. He's a frequent speaker at conferences and events who speaks on content, personal branding, and new age storytelling. Before all this began, Bijay was working as a research scientist in a leading pharmaceutical company. He was clearly losing motivation and drive in his life, and that's when he started The Inspiring Talk. Within 15 months of starting this podcast, he quit his job to follow his passion, podcasting, and inspiring people through his podcasts. This conversation is a masterclass by itself and comes value-packed. There's so much to take away from this hour-long conversation, which is why we've broken it down into 2 parts. I'm going to be dropping Bijay's links in the show notes, so go ahead and give him a follow. And if you'd like to know more, of course, reach out to Bijay. Also, leave us a 5-star rating, leave us a review if you like this conversation. Those ratings matter a lot and helps us keep going. So if you're on Apple, go ahead and give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. And of course, if you listen on any other medium, do leave us a review and a rating. With that, let's dive into this conversation. Hi, and welcome to the Success with Savita podcast. I'm super excited, Bijay, to bring you on today because you have been on my wish list. I actually have it on my computer forever since I started. It's just taken me some time to get around to here, to having you here. So thank you for making the time and being so generous with your time here today. Welcome, and I'm looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here, Savita. And, I'm the one who is on the side where I'm having conversations with people and interviewing them. And it's always fun to be on the other side and being interviewed and share my story. So thank you so much for inviting me on the show.
Oh, you're very humble. But yeah, so let's dive right into it. I want to start off with your journey. And because I know I have been following you on Instagram for a while now, and you have always been, your Instagram handle is Bijay Speaks, and you've always been talking about podcasting, even before it's blown up the way it has in India. So what's your story and what brought you into your podcasting journey? How did you get started?
Yeah, 2017, I was working as a research scientist at a pharmaceutical, and to give a bit of a backdrop of how I landed to become a research scientist was, when I passed my 12th, I wanted to go to the university and study biotechnology. I come from Nepal, and I wanted to go to Kathmandu University in Nepal, which is one of the best universities in the country. And I sat for the entrance exam and I couldn't pass that exam. And till that point in my life, I've never failed any exams, or academically, I never had a setback. I had been an average student throughout my life. And that failure sort of hit me hard. And I remember committing to myself saying that, you know, even if I couldn't make it to the best university, I'm going to be best wherever I go. And that is something that sort of stuck with me. And even today, that is something that stuck with me. Now, because of which I came here in Delhi. And when I started, I joined a college here. And first year of my college, I was topper. Second year, I was awarded as the best student of the pharmacy. Third year, I was awarded with the full fee waiver scholarship. Final year, I was, offered job by one of the top companies in the country, in the pharmaceutical company, because I studied pharmacy. And they sent me this company. When they hired me, they hired like 20 brightest kids from across the country. And they sent us to their training center for the 3 months training. I even topped that training batch. And this was surreal for the kid who all his life believed that he's an average student, right? All my life, I believed that, hey, you know what, being a topper, or, that's something that I could never do. And, in this whole period, I was so much invested into personal growth. I would read a lot of personal, transformation books, listen to people like Robin Sharma, and, and read the blogs on personal transformation. So I was trying to get better, and improve, and constantly try to work hard and, see how I can transform my life. And when I joined as a research scientist, as I said, right, I topped that batch. I got, into the system. Within 6 months, they awarded me as the most promising candidate at the job. And within a year, I have my promotion. And from the outside, it looked like, wow, past few years, 4-5 years had just have been amazing for me. I mean, I was just this average kid having no clue of what I wanted to do in my life, to here I am hitting all these milestones, and it seemed perfect. But 1.5 years into that job, Savita, I asked myself, hey, Bijay, you know what? You've been winning this race, but was this the race that you were supposed to run? Was it really something that you wanted to do in your life? And the answer that came from within was no. And it hurts. And I felt stuck. I felt that what I'm doing right now is something that I don't want to do anymore. And I don't know what I should do next, because all I knew was to become a research scientist. That's what I studied, and that's what I was doing. And that was my world. And as I mentioned, luckily for me, I was exposed to this whole world of personal transformation. I knew these amazing people doing amazing stuff. I knew people who were writing books. I knew people who were climbing mountains. And I used to know about them by looking at, watching the TED Talks, or reading books, or going on, in the conferences and listen them speak. And I thought that, hey, these people seem to have figured out what they want to do in their life. And maybe these people can figure out what I should do next in my life. With that intention, I wanted to, get in conversation with them and pick their blueprint, with the hope that I will find the blueprint which I can use, in my own life. So I started reaching out to people and started, interviewing them. And, and when I started recording these interviews, I was asking all the questions that I needed to know, and that's something that I do even today. And often I tell people that if there is one person who is most inspired by the inspiring talk, then that's me, because it's more of me trying to scratch my own back. Now I use it as a learning tool. Like if there is anything that I need to learn, then I'll go and find the best people whom I can bring on the show, and I'll ask them what I need to know. And that's what I started doing. And when I was recording those conversations, I started putting them out as podcasts, because I was then, exposed. Then I discovered there is something called as podcast. It was 2017, August, when I launched my podcast. And then I realized, wow, this could be an interesting, medium to do it, because I could do it literally from my bedroom, and I still do that from my bedroom. So, it was such a beautiful medium. And I thought, hey, you know what? I think this is what I want to do. I think I have found my blueprint, which is to continue bringing these insights and inspirations so that it can help others make their life a little better. And Savita, you will relate with this, the satisfaction when somebody comes back to you and say that, hey, you know what? That conversation that you had with the person that really helped me in certain way. And I think, that's how I sort of got into podcasting, and I never looked back since then. After that, within 15 months of starting my podcast, I quit my full-time job as a research scientist to become a full-time podcaster. And, and since then I have never looked back.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a fascinating story. And I resonate with you so much because a little bit of envy too, because I wish when I was doing my degree post graduation, I had spent time on personal growth, because that wasn't something that I was exposed to until I actually became, quit my job and became a coach in 2017 and 2018. That's when I got into the coaching industry. And when you started in August 2017, that was your first podcast. You hadn't even done anything before that, right? Okay. But you took the leap of leaving your job and getting into podcasting.
Yeah, that's true. And also, Savita, I must say that even though you came late into this, and this is something that I tell every single person that I meet, that, I had my own set of challenges that, when I started my podcast, right, I struggled big time having conversations with people, because I realized I always thought, because all my life I was this person who would go on stage, host the events. I would go on, debate competitions and, speech competitions and win the awards for the school. I always thought that, I was somebody who can speak well and, talk and sort of get into the conversation. But when I started podcast, I realized that giving speeches and participating in debate is completely different thing, and getting in conversation with people is completely different skill set. And I realized that I suck at having conversations. I realized that I was introverted in that sense, where I would really struggle. Like when I would meet somebody on elevator, when I was at my job, like my workstation was at the third floor, and it would take a few minutes and it would open the first floor and second floor. When I would meet somebody at that, elevator, all I would tell them that, hey, you know what, it's rainy today, it's sunny, or, all I knew or all I could talk was just the weather and nothing else. And then here I am saying that I want to start a podcast. And the way I started was I would write down the 10 questions, and I would go on a Skype call. Back then I recorded my interviews on Skype. I would go on a Skype call, and then, I would just read those questions one after another without paying attention to what the guest is saying. If there is an opportunity to ask the follow-up questions, I started there, right? And I would say being early maybe allowed me to make those mistakes and learn the ropes. But I consider myself like, it took me quite a while to sort of get better at having conversations, because a lot of people are natural conversational, people who are natural conversationalists who can make really good conversations. And I was not one of those, right? So, from there, having that confidence to sort of, hey, I think I can make something out of this. I think it was just, I would say sheer hard work, and also maybe a belief in myself. That I think that's the key, which really, really helped me, was just belief in myself and just focusing on that one thing, right? I haven't looked for anything else. I knew that there has been so many other things that came after podcasting. You look at any of the platforms like TikTok or Instagram or whatever. I stayed true to this one platform, which I continue to do today as well. Just, trusting in myself and staying true to the one platform. Maybe, probably that has helped me.
Yeah, I think it has, because I find what I find interesting is you said you always thought you're an average student, but when you came into your degree, that's when you excelled. And that's, I think, a thing of where we don't know what our potential is unless you're in the right place, or maybe the exposure to personal development did that. And then staying with podcasting, and I think at 2017, in India, it was still new, and being able to stay for so long. I think this has been a very interesting journey, because a lot of people move on very quickly. So I think consistency is key, what you're saying. And of course, the more you do it, the better. So even an introvert, what I hear you say is even an introvert, even somebody who does not know how to have these not natural conversations, can become a great interviewer. So my next question.
Yeah. Before you ask the question, I want to just add a bit of a, context here. Savita, you mentioned about, being consistent. And if you remember when you sent me that message saying that, Bijay, I want to invite you as a guest on my podcast. And I get a lot of requests, right? And I wrote back saying that, Savita, I'm going to be your 25th episode. And I didn't realize that, you already have 66. But the reason I tell people that I'm going to be your 25th guest is because I want to make sure that, the people who have started a podcast stay true to the medium at least for the 6 month. And that's why I always, encourage people saying that, hey, you know what, I'm going to be your 25th guest, because if you have done this for 6 months, that means it shows that, you are committed to this medium. You are committed to what you are doing. You are not one of those people, people often say that, hey, I want you as my first guest, but I'm not interested in becoming a first guest. I'm interested in becoming a 25th, because I don't care how many people are listening to you. I don't care what's your reach like or anything. All I care is that you have been consistent till 25th episodes. And because being a podcaster, and you will relate to this, I know the amount of time, efforts, and energy it takes in reaching 25 episodes. And 80% of people don't even reach that mark.
Yeah, you remind me so much of Gary Vee, because I believe this is what he also does. He tells people, I want to see you being consistent. So you remind me of that. And I realized when you told me that I want to be your 25th, I realized where I was, and I respected that for a very different reason, Bijay, because you also teach people podcasting. You also teach people how to become a podcaster. So you're saying true to that principle, that is, hey, you start this, I will show you, I'll tell you how to do this, and then I will, be on your 25th. So I realized why, and I really respect you saying that. Moving on though, I want to ask you, not many people, I would say, would set up a studio, raise funding, because I found this very, very interesting. Even me, if I had to do this business, I don't know if I would set up a studio, raise funding. What was that journey like? And from starting in 2017 to where you are now, what have been those milestones for WYN Studio?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting and kind of funny story how WYN Studio, we started the podcast production company that I run today along with my partner. Yeah, I mean we and WYN Studio, that's the name that my partner Sonia came up with. But the way it happened was I started teaching people how to start a podcast, because when I was doing my show in 2017, there were not many people doing podcast in India. And, people were slowly waking up to the idea of starting podcast. And I've been doing podcast for almost 1.5, 2 years. And then people, started reaching out to me saying that, hey, can you help us start a podcast? So, that's how I started sort of helping, coaching, teaching people on how to start podcast. And I was doing a lot of those on Zoom back in the days. I used to, so I started Zoom back in 2018. Okay. I didn't wait for the lockdown. So anyways, so I was, helping people through Zoom and stuff like that, because I had quit my job and I was consulting a podcast company called Castbox. And all of that I was doing from home. And I was like, hey, you know what? I need a vacation. I need a chutti, because I've been doing this for a while and I need a kind of break. And I thought, hey, I want to do something interesting where I want to teach people podcasting, but I want to take them to the mountains, not from, Zoom or virtually. So I put together this, program called Himalayan Podcast Retreat, where I would take 10 people to the mountains and then, and then spend time with them for 3 days there in the mountains, and then teach them how to start a podcast and actually start their podcast at the end of that 3 days, right? So when I put that event, 3 days program, end of that program, third day, one of the participants of that event, Sonia says that, hey, I would love to have a chat with you. And I said, yeah, sure. What is it about? And then we got talking, and, she mentioned, the kind of startups that she had worked in the past, and how she gets fascinated with the new age media and stuff like that. And she has been to IM and so on and so forth. And she said, hey, if you are keen, then we can explore this idea of, starting a podcast company. And at that point of time, I was also contemplating and also, looking at building my own podcasting company. And it sort of, and we just got talking. And after that, we thought, like, let's start this together. And that's how sort of WYN Studio, was born in 2019. September, we started WYN Studio. And one of the core reasons why, Savita, that I wanted to start a podcast company, and this is something that, everyone at WYN Studio is committed, is because we wanted to create podcasts which really are meaningful and which and wanted to experiment with a lot of different formats of the podcasts, where we wanted to take the listener experience to the next level, and then try and stay as away as possible from the normal formats of the podcast, which are, just the conversational formats, right? So that was the whole intention. And with that idea, we've done some of the shows, almost every single show that we've produced at WYN Studio have been, on the top of the charts, and we have more than 3 million, listens for our shows. And we have worked with some of the brands, global brands like Binance, which is the largest, cryptocurrency exchange platform. And, and we have produced podcasts for them in 5 different languages. So from the milestone standpoint, we have, created a podcast called Here's with the Pandavas, which takes the whole listening experience to the completely new level. It's a mythology fiction podcast that we created with another fellow podcaster, Nikesh Murali, who is brilliant with his craft when it comes to writing and narrating the story. And then we took his stories to notch higher with, the production ability that we bring on the table. And, so it's been such a great journey for us at WYN Studio to, on a day-to-day basis, talk to brands and then, see how we can create podcasts for brands. And I don't think there could have been better time to be in this business than now, because the excitement that we see from the brand, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah. And was raising funding a natural transition, or you decided long back to do it, or it's something that you feel to scale now it has come up as a decision? And was it challenging to raise for this segment?
Yeah. So, when it comes to funding, we're doing our own thing. We have been profitable from day one, and we didn't need funding for us to sort of grow the natural way, right? So the reason we raised funding more than money, it was more of a strategic decision for us, because we wanted, the people who were putting money in our sort of business were the people who, brought completely different skill sets, and also the people who could really connect us with and bring on the networks which can really help our business. So it was more of a strategic decision than us needing sort of money to grow, right? So from that perspective, the people who have sort of invested in the company, they were really, really excited about what we're doing and how we're sort of building the company, and obviously the passion that our team sort of share. So it was more of I would say natural strategic decision than anything else.
Okay, awesome. And now I want to dive right into podcasting for our audience, who are mostly young entrepreneurs, small business owners, and a few brands. But my first question around the area of podcasting is, why do you think audio is doing so well in India now? And from the time you started in 2017 to now, what have you seen are major changes in this space?
2017, if we were having this conversation and you asked me, like, Bijay, do you think in another 2 to 3 years, Bollywood will get into podcasts, like Amitabh Bachchan will do podcasts? And I would say, no way, Savita, you are just kidding. Because like, I can literally count the number of people who are doing podcasts here in India right now. And I could literally, count like 20, 25 people that I sort of knew who were doing podcasts in India when I started back in 2017. And you are saying that, Amitabh Bachchan or Bollywood is going to get into podcasts? No way, right? But then fast forward to now, I think 2019, Amitabh Bachchan did the podcast, right? So, and so one thing is a lot of platforms now that are getting into podcasting, right? So every single music streaming apps are now getting into podcasting. Now, if you think about it, Spotify and JioSaavn are going to play the same music. And how you are going to differentiate for the audience. And also music streaming is very, very costly business for, them to sort of, run that business, because you have to pay the licensing fee to the artists and so on and so forth, like a lot of stuff involved there. Now, podcast became such an amazing differentiator for themselves. Now, if you see, Spotify is crazily spending in the, Spotify originals, the podcasts that are exclusive on Spotify. JioSaavn is doing the same. Ghana is doing the same. And you will see more of that happening, where it's going to be more of a streaming war, just the way you see Netflix, Amazon, and all these video streaming platforms getting into the exclusive sort of a content. You will see that happening here in the podcasting landscape as well. So that's one. A lot of investor money is flowing into the medium right now. So that's first. Second one, we have started seeing Bollywood getting into podcasting. We have seen other influencers getting into this, right? So you have seen creators from Instagram or YouTube jumping into this medium. And the reason for that is simple, right? If you want to get someone's attention, video can be great medium. But let's be honest. But if you want to retain someone's attention for a longer period of time, then podcast is such a great medium, because you can't retain somebody for half an hour or 45 minutes on a video, but you can do that on audio because listening is secondary activity, right? So that's the second one. Third one, we have also seen a lot of media houses now jumping into podcasting, right? So radio stations are now creating exclusive podcast programming, where earlier they started by just repurposing the radio content and dumping it as a podcast files, but now they are creating original podcast content, which means a lot of creative people are sort of jumping into this whole podcasting space. So that's the third one. And also the fourth one is the consumption of the podcast is growing crazily. Just to state, throw some numbers here. 2017, there were 25 million podcast listeners. 2018, there were 40 million podcast listeners. 2020, there were 70 million podcasts. In 2021, there were almost 100 million podcast listeners. Now, that's quadruple, like from 25 million podcast listeners in India when I started in 2017 to now, we are saying that we are at 100 million podcast listeners. That's crazy growth that we have seen, which means now that listeners are growing, the people who are sort of, and also vernacular or the regional language content, there are platforms like, Headphone, and so many other platforms like Hubhopper, Headphones, and there is one more, these guys are raising like crazy, Cuckoo FM, and these guys are raising crazy amount of money from investors to Awaz to go regional and create content in a lot of local languages like Marathi, Tamil, Telugu, and whatnot, right? So all of this is fueling the growth of podcast and sort of getting people into this medium, and it goes back to the time of India has a rich culture of listening to stories, right? We all have grown up listening to audio stories. And then now people are sort of getting back to it, and podcasting is sort of, doing that, which is such a natural thing to happen, in the country.
Yeah. You explained that in a lot of detail. Thank you for sharing that. My next question is, this is something that a lot of people ask. There are already so many podcasts. Is it too late to start a podcast now?
I would say it's and this is when somebody asked me this question, there is this sort of a, data that I sort of throw at people and tell them like, look at this and tell me if you are late, right? So it's a little old data. Right now, there are more than 3 million podcasts, but when there were 2 million podcasts, there was this report that came out, right? Out of 2 million podcasts, okay, only 36% people, 36% podcasters created more than 10 episodes. Only a little over 1/3 out of 20 lakh, and this is the global number, okay? Out of 20 lakh people who started podcast, only 7 lakh people went beyond 10 episodes. And if you ask me, out of those 7 lakh people, how many would have released at least one episode 3 months, like in the past 3 months? Then that number would come somewhere between 3 to 4 lakh only. Now look at that number, right? So we are talking about 10 to 15% of people who start podcast are the ones who actually release more than 10 episodes, which means that it doesn't matter how many people actually started podcast. The people who are actually doing good and building audience, building their personal brand, building their influence and authority, using the power of podcast are the people who are consistently getting better and consistently putting their episodes out. Now, if we really look at numbers here in India, I don't think we even have more than 2,000, a country of 1 billion. And we don't even have more than 2,000, 3,000. That's my estimate. And I could be wrong. 2,000 to 3,000 podcasts with more than 10 episodes, at least one episode in the past 3 months. Now, if you think about that, then, it tells us that, the space is still highly, highly underserved. That's one. Second, the regional language, space, it's going to blow up like anything in, anything this year and next year, 2023. And it still is highly, highly underserved market. There could be a lot of people now, tools like Anchor from Spotify makes it so easy for anyone to become a podcaster. but that doesn't mean that we have enough good quality content, right? The people who are putting enough research and time in creating content. So it's all about, how, so sure, maybe, you don't have the opportunity to fail as much as like when I started in 2017, I could, still build a podcast with this weird accent and, will the grammatical errors that I have and the pronunciation mistakes that I make and being really, really bad at interviewing people. I could fail, but maybe you need to, maybe you might not have that time to sort of fail, but you still have a huge opportunity to, make podcasts really, really big. If you go on Spotify or Apple Podcast and look at some of the top podcasts on the chart, you will see some of those podcasts have just started a year back or maybe a few months back. So it's definitely not late. And I would say for the people who are listening, and if you have been remotely thinking of doing a regional language podcast, take my words, go back and start your podcast. And 6 months, you will come back to me and say that, Bijay, I listened to you on Savita's podcast, and you said that if you have been thinking of doing a regional podcast, even if you have a remotely thought of it, go ahead and execute it. And 6 months, you are going to have, crazy numbers of people listening to you. And here are my results. Because I see this over and over again with the people whom I teach podcasting, and and the other creators who are creating in the regional language. It's growing up like crazy. So I would say, you not at all, you have missed the podcasting bus yet. But, maybe things might not be same next year or year after that.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. Stay tuned as we take a quick break, and we'll see you on the other side of the show. True. Yeah, I think that gives me a lot of confidence to hear you share that. And it's so true. Regional podcasts are blowing up. I have thought sometimes like, okay, the only language I may be great at it may be my own language, Kurgi or Kannada. So maybe I should try something. But, this podcast takes enough time. But I think, yes, for all those who are listening, regional podcasts are going to blow up, if not already, right? So many are already so successful. I want to know, like a lot of brands do reach out saying, oh, you're doing a podcast. Can you be a host? Can you produce? So that's the area that's growing for podcasters. How can brands today who are not thinking about podcasting and they're thinking like, is it something I should do? How can brands leverage podcasting? If you could share 1-2 reasons and ways that they could leverage it.
I can share quite a few, because that's what we do at WYN, right? We are constantly talking to brands and understanding how we can sort of serve them best with the podcasts. And there are a few things that and we have started seeing that kind of awareness coming in the brands, and now they are sort of saying that I want to have podcast in my marketing mix, because it seems that a lot of people are listening. As I said, 100 million people in India are listening to podcasts today, right? So the first one is, podcast allows you to have deeper engagement with the audience, which no other medium offers, right? So what is the average time that people spend watching a video nowadays? It's like 3 to 4 minutes or max 5 minutes. That's like average time we spend watching a video. 2 to 3 minutes, that's the time that we spend browsing and quickly having a glance on a blog post. And 30 minutes, 30, that's the average time people spend listening to a podcast. And now you can't get that level of engagement on any other medium. And the reason for that is simple. Listening is a secondary activity. People are not lying on their couch and just listening to a podcast. They are doing something else. They are driving, cooking, cleaning, or taking their dog in the park or working out. And because they are doing something else, podcast becomes such a great medium. And you are literally on their ears. They are listening to you on headphones, right? You are literally on their ear, and you are there for 30 minutes. And that builds a very, very deeper engagement with the brand. That's first. Second, and probably one of the most important things that we need to understand when it comes to audio or podcast as a medium is this: 80% or even more than that, video consumption that happens today is unintentional consumption. These videos are served to me by the algorithm. When I go on Instagram, I see this dog video. I didn't have an intention to watch that video, but Instagram threw that at me because the algorithm figured out that I somehow like dogs, then it will show me more dogs videos. Or, if I'm into whatever you are into, you just see that video, you move on. You didn't have an intention to watch. You didn't go on YouTube to say that cute dog videos. If I go on a YouTube and search cute dog videos and watch that video for 5 minutes, then I had an intention to watch that video. But on my Instagram, I didn't have an intention, right? Now, if you look at past 10 videos that you have sort of consumed, okay, then you will realize that, it's one or maybe two at best are the videos where you actually went on. Maybe like, you wanted to make something, for dinner for your family, and you said like, okay, let me, look at the recipe of this. And you went on YouTube and searched for that video, which means you had an intention to watch that video. But 80% of the videos that we consume today, we didn't have any intention to consume. We don't have any intention to watch it served to us. And because that we don't have an intention, the retention is very, very high. We drop off very soon. We don't remember the last reel that we watched.
Gosh, yes, I can't.
And now, on the other hand, on the podcast, 90% of the podcast consumption that happens today is intentional. I choose to listen to Savita's podcast. It just doesn't randomly appear on my Spotify feed, and Spotify don't randomly throw this podcast at me, right? So I have this intention to listen to this podcast, and that's why I listen to this podcast. And what that means is, if I have that high intention, then I might as well stick till the end of this podcast. I might as well listen to this podcast. If somebody listens to a food podcast every single week, then these are the people whom you should be talking to as a food brand, because these are the people who are foodies. These are the people who are really passionate about food. Or if somebody is listening to a podcast about parenting, then these are the parents who need to learn how to parent their kid, right? So that is another thing. And because of which there is a higher recall value, because they remember the podcast that they listen to, and they remember the product or the service or whatever that is mentioned on that podcast, they remembers that, right? And also the third one is, because of this, it helps you build a strong brand affinity and trust on your brand, and also build a very, very meaningful engagement and connection with your listeners. So those are the few reasons why you should be looking at podcasts. And also I tell brands that if you are looking at vanity metrics like, hey, but there are 10,000 people who watched my reel, or a million people watched, I got 1 million views on my reels, then out of those 1 million people, like, they just spent 5 seconds of their time watching your reel, and you are comparing that 5 seconds with 30 minutes 10,000 people spend listening to your podcast. I mean, that's not even a comparison, right? 10,000 people spending 30 minutes. These are the people that you should be talking to, because this audience is already filtered out. So that's how sort of brands really should think about when they are thinking of including podcast in their marketing mix.
Wow, that's really important for brands to consider. What you're saying is very, very key. And I think, yes, it should be part of the marketing mix. Now, let's say I'm a brand new podcaster. I've decided I want to create a podcast. What are, like your top 3 things that every podcaster should keep in mind before they even start their podcast? Instead of diving into it like, feel good today, I have this idea to start a podcast. Let me just roll out a conversation.
Yeah. So, there are 3 things that I always tell people that they need to have absolute clarity of before starting a podcast, if you're just starting one, right? So the first one is, why do you want to start a podcast? That's very, very important for you to just have an understanding of why do you want to start a podcast? Because I believe that for you and me, Savita, to be consistent in anything in our life, we need to have, for us to be successful in anything that we do in our life, we need to be consistent. And consistency comes from having the understanding of why do we want to do it, right? So that's why it's very, very important for you to have the clarity of. So that is the first one, is so be very clear on why do you want to start a podcast? Is it because you want to build your personal brand? Is it because you want to grow your business, or do you want to network with people, or maybe you want to learn, right? Like I said, I wanted to learn with my podcast, right? That could be a why. So that's the first thing. The second thing that you need to have absolute clarity of is, who is your audience? You need to understand, who am I serving? Because when you have a clarity of who my audience is when you will have a clarity of what are the pain point and problem of my audiences are that I can solve on my podcast. And if you're solving the problem of your audience on a podcast, is when these people want to come and listen to your podcast. And the third one is, what is the unique thing that I'm bringing on the podcast, which is not existent on all these podcasts that are already out there on the topic that I am looking at creating my podcast. So that is something that, those are the three things that you need to have, because, you might think of an idea and you want to just go ahead and start executing on it. But just know that oftentimes the first idea that comes in our head is the most obvious one. And everyone else is thinking of the same exact idea. And there are so many people who have already executed on that idea. So if you want to really create something meaningful, then, take time on checking out what's already available and then figuring out how you can, differentiate your podcast from all the other shows that are out there.
Amazing. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like this episode and you want more, you can go to the show notes on my website, which is successwithsavita.com/podcast. If you like what you've heard so far, I would be grateful to you if you could leave me a 5-star review, subscribe to this podcast, and share with a friend who may find this useful. You can also follow me on my Instagram @successwithsavita and DM me any questions you may have, and I will be happy to answer them for you. Until the next episode, believe in yourself and all the best to your success.